Hello and welcome to a special episode of the D1Baseball Podcast. I am your host, Michael Patrick Rooney. It is officially the off season. The College World Series just wrapped up, and we are going to have some fun with some different topics with our podcast this summer. And if you're watching, you can see my guest is the great Alan Jaeger. If you're in baseball, you know Coach Jaeger. I had to think about this, Alan. Like, how would I describe you? And I would say, first of all, the founder of Jaeger Sports. That's the formal part. But I think of J bands and long toss. Someone my age would if I was asked to describe J bands, I would say, rubber tubing. And I think like the younger generation would be like, I don't even know what rubber tubing is. I know what J bands are. Like you guys have become like Xerox and Kleenex. It's like there is no rubber tubing. There's just J bands. And then also you in my baseball life, one of the longtime proponents of long toss. And, I feel like now because of your good efforts, people look at not doing long toss as almost like way more frightening than actually doing it. So it's good to have you. I enjoy when we get to do these conversations. We'll have some fun in a second, but we're going to talk about an article that you wrote 4 years ago, July of 2021. It was called Bridging the Gap, Making a Safe and Effective Transition from High School or College Baseball to Professional Baseball. And, we are about 2 weeks away from the 2025 draft, so that's top of mind right now. All right, so let me ask you a couple fun questions first. Do you have a routine for watching the MLB draft? How do you go about doing that?
Oh my goodness. Well, I've had a couple of opportunities to go be with somebody locally in person and take it in that way, like a draft party. And that was exciting. And then, no, to be honest with you, I think I don't know. I think it's like a lot of us that we get in our own little cubby hole and we're in our own space and we want to process it. I like to watch the pre-draft show, kind of leading up to it. I find that very exciting and informative, and also like kind of being near the phone in case I have vested interest in particular players that I've either directly or indirectly worked with. Yeah, and then also I guess I've been doing this so long that I'm like a mother hen, meaning even if like if Nate Yeskie or Scott Brown has a player drafted, I might want to shoot him a text, congratulations. So yeah, I think it's a smorgasbord basically, but I'm probably no different than most people. I just like to get in my own little world and just I appreciate it because we all know like the draft yesterday or the day before with the NBA. Today's the hockey draft. It's a very, very special moment in not just the player, the family, the coaches, the coaches when the kid was 9 years old, and as you well know, Runes, it's just it's a very, very cool day and moment. So yeah, just kind of hanging out.
Very cool and very impactful. The college coach in me will never disappear. And I remember being at Arizona State 20 years ago, and like you said, you kind of hole up, and like the draft is something you typically watch by yourself, and all of the efforts that you've put into recruiting, you're torn, right? Because you get to know the players and their families, and their dream is to be a big leaguer. So like half of you is happy when one of your players gets drafted high. But the other half of you, if we're being really honest, is in your office lighting candles with rosary beads, just hoping that guys slip in the draft. And then they, of course, we want them to be first rounders after their college experience, not necessarily before their college experience. So anyway, I'm not afraid to admit that. Tell me this. We're going to talk a lot about pitching and process and those types of things. Who, like, you could name more than one, but my question is like, who are some of the pitchers in big league baseball right now who you really enjoy, kind of how they operate, how they view baseball, pitching, etc.? Like who are guys that you enjoy kind of leaning into and learning how they do things?
Yeah, well, I'll start off selfishly with someone local, which is Kershaw. I don't know the consistency with him. Obviously, he's reinvented himself a little bit too with his curveball into his cutter. But I actually thought about this when we talked about it earlier, and I think of someone like Jacob deGrom. There's a fluidity about him. I teach pitching more as a dance and a repeatable feeling dance. But I really want to go to, and then I'm biased. I love watching Hunter Green, Max Fried.
Mm.
is another one. Um, uh, Garrett Cole last year in the World Series was one of the better performances I'd seen in a long time. That was impressive, and of course Skeens. But I just have to throw out a couple old school just because I know you'll appreciate it. But Trevor Hoffman is just way Hoffman, Maddox, Pedro. Um, those are three pitchers that, and Rivera. Those were like I would stop anywhere and to just, yeah, it was just a unique. I guess it was when people talked about watching McGuire take BP. For me, when I watched those guys, there was just something different, and I was really lucky. I actually saw Pedro when he was with the Red Sox in Anaheim. I can't remember what year it was, but it was probably in his sweet spot, and I couldn't believe the effortless 97 backed up with a 79-mile-an-hour changeup with full intent, full fastball looking body language. And then he comes with the hammer, which one of the best hammers of all time. And then, as you know, he would subtract off his fastball just
Yeah.
because, like, he was like Maddox, he was it's the few, like, I love the art, and I know you do too, the art of it, and the guys that, Hoffman getting people out with one pitch for the most part, as Mariano did, even though they had other pitches obviously to work off that pitch. But there was just an art form to those guys. So I had to go a little old school with you.
That's awesome. And Pedro, like he was ahead of his time where like I feel like he was the lower release high ride fastball and now that's like I feel like you see it once a weekend if not more in college baseball. Like that has become people don't do it as well as Pedro clearly, but yeah, I feel like that style of throwing is really popular now.
Yeah, and I'll just throw this out there because we'll plug back to long toss. One thing that I do think people are starting to do some research on this, but I've been saying this for years, ever since data came out and effective velocity came out, which is the ball basically rising, so to speak, relatively speaking. And we in the old days, what did we do? We called that carry, right?
Yeah.
We called it life. And one of the things I could say from 35 years of not only teaching long toss but doing it myself is one of the most beautiful things about long toss is coming in after you've gone out to full distance with full arc, and you start getting that backspin and you start your pull downs, but you're getting the pull downs as a byproduct of your arm already creating this incredible range of motion from going uphill,
Yeah.
right? So you're getting all this natural layback, if you will. And it's almost like that layback then has a chance, this bigger layback by throwing it higher and farther then creates this greater forward explosion or finish, if you will. And so that variance, the greater degree of variance to me is creating more of the backspin, which is now what they call vertical break. So I've had a couple, one guy in particular in a major league organization work on this with some of his extended spring guys. And to where they weren't maybe big long toss guys. If the guy's already a huge long toss guy with a lot of arc and distance, there may not be a whole lot more to it. But for someone that's not a big long toss guy, that's not getting much arc or height or distance, you could actually dramatically influence their vertical break. And maybe that's not out there yet scientifically, but I can tell you from 35 years, one of the most common things that come out of long toss, besides health and endurance and velocity, is life and carry and what they're calling now vertical break.
Yeah, that's awesome. Hey, so let's jump in here. So, like in my mind, Alan, there's gonna be two parts to the conversation. There's gonna be one part where we kind of nerd out on the pitching part, and then there's gonna be one part that I think applies to all facets of life, which is it's almost like collaboration. Like how do you own your own career, but also be a collaborator? Also make the organization you're with feel like you're not just a lone wolf. Like there's a real how do I maintain the things that make me great and the things I really believe in while also assimilating myself into an organizational philosophy. I think that applies to all walks of life. It ain't easy either, by the way. Like that's really tricky stuff. And again, like I would encourage anyone, if you've not seen this article, you could press pause now and just all you got to do is Google Alan Jaeger, Jaeger, and then build bridging the gap, making a safe and effective transition from high school and or college baseball to professional baseball. And, as you know, Alan, like the draft's in 2 weeks and there's all the elation of that. But now you're a player, and I'm going to focus on the college players. You're a 21-year-old probably who's, in today's day and age, you have a very set routine. And you've been like amateur baseball works on a 7-day throwing program. In amateur baseball, high school, college, summer ball, travel ball, most pitchers throw, and we're very focused on starting pitchers. We can adapt this for relief pitchers clearly, but you throw once a week. And once you get into professional baseball, the people in professional baseball are going to want you to start to transition to throwing every 5 days, starting every 5 days for many reasons. The article does a really good job getting into the detail of, professional baseball doesn't want you to do every 5 days because they're evil or dumb or, like there's very real reasons. Some of them are you're getting older and stronger. Some of them are, hey, it's an economy, right? Professional baseball has economic parameters that go into that. And so, like, again, the more I throw, the more I get paid, right? Like there's that part of it. So you offer very strong opinions on like what's the best way for someone who's been used to throwing every 7 days, starting every 7 days, to assimilate into a pro system, and how do the two people, like that pitcher and the new organization they're going to, how do they come together and make that happen? So why don't you go ahead, like if you want to overview kind of your thoughts on that part.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's all you doing your homework on the article because you just hit the core. And look, as you said, Runes, everybody is doing their best. Everybody wants the best out of the situation, obviously. I come out of a world where for 15 years we ran a 2-month camp for professional pitchers before spring training. And so things have gotten dramatically better. But I used to go to spring training every single year, mainly to the backfields, and just sort of watch how the players were transitioning into the organization. And again, I want to make this very clear. Things have, I'm going to use the word profoundly changed for the better, even from 10 years ago. But I would watch these dramatic contrasts of what we did with the players for 2 months, getting them into great long toss shape where they could, quote unquote, throw all day, throw a lot and recover well, to 10 minutes of a time throwing program out to 120 feet as an example. We had guys throwing 20, 25 minutes out to 300 plus feet, rolling out of bed. With no problem. So I've changed now my feelings because I feel like the organizations now are more modernized. They're more open-minded. They're more aware that these kids are, whether it's driveline, trad athletics, wherever they're going, they're getting a lot of good information. They're getting whether they're at a major university or high school, there's a lot of information. And some might say there's too much information, but there's a lot of information out there. These kids are getting very, very well educated. And I'm not saying it's all perfect, and as I wrote in the article, some of these kids start as early as 8 or 9 years old, where they're just slowly building an evolution of who they are and their skin, and what their training program looks like. And by the time they get drafted, as you said, they have a great plan in place. And so I'm going to use your word from the beginning, which is one of the most important words of the article, which is collaboration.
Yeah.
So to your point, from the player side, the player needs to be really well aware of advocating for his arm and why did you get drafted, right? It's probably because of how you've been preparing and training your whole life, at least a lot of it. So that's one. But the player, to your point, needs to go into the organization because they're assimilating and be open-minded to listen to what the professional's experience is all about. But to me, I almost say there's more onus on the professional organization because they're getting someone new. Mm-hmm. And I feel like they're, let's say, more adults compared to a young kid, right? And I feel like the onus is on them to bring them in. I know the scouts do a great job up front of getting a lot of information and data, but I still think that from the player development side, when these kids show up, every kid, if they haven't done it, pre-draft or pre-sign, they need to know in gory detail, not only what the player's 7-day routine was like, what you do every day, what you do in the off season, what you do on your start day, what you do the next day. But they need to know about arm care and whether it's bands or weighted balls or not weighted balls, body blades, whatever. They're just things that you need to know everything about this player. And then the last thing I'll say, so we can keep going on with, is that I think the organization needs to understand that these kids may not speak up, or they may be shy, there may be an authority figure factor, and that they have to help this player transition smoothly by acquiescing in a way, or letting the player know, like, look, if we hear that you really have a great plan, we want to support that and watch and observe. And yeah, we can
Yeah.
still throw our 2 cents in, but we want you to feel comfortable knowing that we hear you, right? We're aware that you have a great program. Now, if you don't have a great program in place and you're really sort of just got there because you rolled out of bed throwing 100 miles an hour, I can understand the organization being way more proactive and wanting to construct things. But I think the most important thing, Runes, is that this, as you said, it has to be a collaboration, but I think the organization has to be very sensitive to asking a lot of questions and knowing it's okay to step out of the way and just watch the pitcher do their thing for a while. And one other thing is maybe not go to a 6 or 5 day rotation. Most of them now go to a 6 day right away, which is great. I would advocate for the pitcher, for them to watch the pitcher for at least 3 or 4 weeks. Just keep them on a 7 day. You got plenty of pitchers. If you run out of roster space, a lot of these kids report to the complexes, right? So you can work them out there for a few weeks. And nowadays, the draft is so late that you're not even doing a short season, and it's almost straight into what we used to call, what did it call in the winter?
Like winter ball, or
They used to bring in a bunch of kids just for the winter alone.
like those camps that like instructs. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so between not really a season, sort of instructs. Nowadays, they're bringing them a lot earlier, early camp in January. Just what an opportunity to give this kid 3 or 4 starts. Just say, hey, we just want to watch, unless you really want help and you don't feel like you really know what to do. Just let us go to school on what, if you're the 5th pick or the 200th pick, it doesn't matter. You're there, or a free agent even. Let's just, what is it going to hurt? You're not winning anything in a 4-week short season or whatever it is, or an instructional league. And so I know that was a long-winded answer, but it's got to come back, in my opinion, to these kids need to have an opportunity to show what they do and why they got to where they got to. And the organization needs to be highly aware of again, knowing that these kids may not, especially an 18-year-old, may not come in there, and they may be a little bit, afraid of saying anything, even if they know in their bones that what they're doing and what they're kind of being told to do may be polar opposites.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like I think of this conversation as it's an opinion to be offered to professional baseball. Like almost an encouragement and opinion. Certainly not a lecture, like you mentioned. Like these people, this is player development is their livelihood. They're in the weeds every day. They've never been more educated on the science of the sport, in addition to the competitive side of it. I think we'll get to the encouragement and the opinion we'll offer to families, to the players, because I think they play in a role. But as I heard you talking, like 2 things jumped out at me. One is, hey, 7-day, if this kid's been doing a 7-day sequence for 7 years, we don't need to go to a 6-day sequence. We certainly don't need to go to a 5-day sequence like overnight, right? Like we've got, like, give it a minute. And I like what you said, watch. Like I think the 2 key verbs for the player dev people, which clearly they're doing, is watch and listen, watch and listen, watch and listen. And if you're going to act, miss on the side of slow versus fast, because, and I also think, Alan, watch and listen, and is a key word there, because some of these kids are going to be poor communicators. They're just at that stage in their life where they're talking to an adult, they're nervous, they've just come off the elation of a draft and all those types of things. And man, you could pull a muscle, in that adjustment from just you're on top of the earth to holy cow, I'm actually at the bottom of the food chain now, and I've got to start to climb my way up. You can go anywhere you want with that information, but I do want to ask a question. Like, because pitching injuries have become so prevalent, do you worry that like professional organizations feel pressure to just kind of like rush everybody, as you know, like rush is probably too the wrong word, but do you feel like people have this pressure to work fast because the injury feels inevitable, not preventable, if that makes sense?
Yeah, you mean the organization to almost have to rush the players because they have guys breaking down, let's say in the big league, so it's trickling down. Is that what you mean?
Well, yeah, like if I'm an organization, I get these pitchers, it's almost like I feel like I know they're going to break down, so let's just get everything we can out of the kid before they break down. Then we'll repair them and start again. But instead of, it's almost like in my mind, I already know they're going to break down. Now it's just how much can we get out of them before that happens. And maybe nobody thinks that way, but it does feel like the injuries have become so prevalent.
Yeah, I would say that they're still doing a good job. Still meaning, I think it's always been there that there's a conservative approach, whether it's innings limit, pitch counts. Not that I'm in favor of that in a lot of situations, but just to your point, to their credit, they're being conservative, whether it's perfect or not. They're being conservative about workload and pitch count and innings, and I think they're monitoring them in the off season and maybe spring training. They're building them up slowly. They're having these early camps to kind of mitigate that as well. But to your point, I think what's happening is that because there's too much protection and too much conservatism, which again, the article talks a lot about when you're on a 7-day routine, you have a lot of time to train and condition and get, I'll use a Randy Sullivan term. I quote Randy a lot, to get robust.
Nice.
So, you know, part of the problem with the 5-day is you're losing 2 crucial days of arm conditioning. What I call recovery and reload, like big deal. And so that's where I use the word shock a lot in the article. So I think part of what's happening is that we have to figure out a way early on to put these kids in a position. That's why I want the 7-day for at least a cycle, and for sure the 6-day for at least a year, so that they can slowly wean off of missing a day, but there's still an extra at least 1 day to mitigate that conditioning. But I think what's happening, to your question or point, is that guys are, not that the organization's rushing anybody, but so many arms are going down that by just sheer numbers, players are maybe having to move up maybe faster than they're ready, uh, faster than they've had, even what the organization wants to, from an innings perspective or maturity perspective. And so that's a tricky part, because now you're just having guys that are getting hurt based on just the amount of percentages they're getting hurt, and you're having to fill roster spots up and down the organization. And I'm not saying the organization's at fault for rushing them. I think it's just the nature of the beast that you need bodies. You need arms, and obviously they're trying to bring up the arms that are going to help at the next level. But and again, I don't want to say that they are rushing anybody on purpose. It's just, if a guy's in Double-A and he's doing well, but he got a year and a half of pro ball because he's excelling, and he's 22, and now he's by far your best prospect, and he's proving out to be durable. And then you have 3 guys go down to the big leagues in 3 weeks, and you pull a couple of veterans maybe from AAA that are an innings eater and they're good. But there's some point you're in a pennant race. It's July, it's August, and it's right before the trade deadline. You're trying to find out if we win a few more games, So it's very complicated. But Ruins, I would say the bigger concern with me on the injuries is it feels more like the avoiding the arm injury has caused so much conservatism.
Yeah.
And this is straight from a Lance Wheeler line, but you have to train to get strong and robust and trust that process. knowing that you're going to be able to handle a lot more. And I feel like where we've gone sort of south the last 10 to 20 years is we're, I hate to use the word babying, but we're just very, very conservative with arms. And I think back to the earlier point, if we would do our homework on these players and really pick their brain, and you made such a great point, these kids are so young that they may feel scared, vulnerable. They just may not feel like they could even speak up because of the authority figures. There's the first time they're seeing New York Yankees, LA Dodgers logo on a uniform like 6 inches away from them. And so I feel like they are going into a model that is based more on conservatism, where if they had a chance to be heard and spoken, and organizations went to school on what I would consider to be the majority of kids coming into the draft, they'd actually find that the majority of kids are doing a lot of throwing and a lot of conditioning, a lot of training. They're ready. They're
Yep.
ready to stay in that mode versus let's pull the reins back off, slow down. We don't want anybody to get hurt. And we both know, I mean, that's one of the reasons people get hurt is you start to, overmanage the workload.
Yeah, and the word that that I'm reminded of that you used earlier and you used in the article is shock. It's like shock can go in two different directions. Like you can take a baseline workload and you can overcook it too fast above that. But it sounds like because of the prevalence of the arm injuries, really, rushing is not what's going on. To your point, it's like now everyone has gotten too anxious about it, and so now we're under training, and then that creates just as the truth is that creates just as many problems as overtraining or the shock. Like gradual adjustments to the baseline is the answer, not a whipsaw off of the baseline. That because again, every player, good, bad, or indifferent, does arrive in that organization with a baseline work regimen, and then just slowly increasing that or decreasing it as all parties see fit. That sounds like that's the answer.
Yeah, and we talked about this off camera, but a line again that Randy Sullivan uses that he got from Dr. Marcus Elliott is managing the delta. And I don't want to misquote Marcus or Randy, but from what I gather, I think they've used this concept as an indicator really of why we have not even just arm injuries, but why the body breaks down is because there's a change in the delta. And as you said earlier, you used the word assimilate. I think my article is really, in some ways, being very simple and just saying, look, we have to do what you just said. Like we have to know what I love that word. We have to know what the baseline is. It's absolutely critical. What is the baseline? We need to know 4,000 facts about the baseline of that arm, period. Once we get that information, let's not worry yet about how it fits into our model. Let's not go there yet. We need to stay with the process. What are those 4,000 variables? Let's get that right with this player. Player C may only have 2,000 variables or 200, but we need to get this right. Now we know what their delta is. We know what their baseline is. We know what their baseline is. So now we need to, that's why I said earlier, it's more on the organization to adapt to the player. That's where this is, because you're right, the PD people, the player development people, they're working hard. They care. They're doing their homework. It's not that they're not, but I think this is where maybe the power of the organization or the organization philosophy can get a little tricky, because they have done their homework and they have a lot of merit behind what they teach and profess, and that's great. But if we asked of the 40 pitchers that sign with each new organization, or whatever it is, 20, if we really sat down for 3 hours with every pitcher and asked every question we could think of about their arm and arm training, arm development from the day they can remember throwing a baseball, I just have a feeling we would get so much information. We would look at that so differently. Yes, we know our philosophy. We believe in our philosophy, but we have to suspend that midair for a second. we need to first do. I use this line a lot with mental stuff. You got to take care of A. Don't worry about B. We just got to lock into A. Do A right. B, we'll get to B. B will take care of itself. And I feel like the A right now is the onus is on the organization to vet this player 4,000 ways, get the baseline, to steal your word, And then now we have the baseline. Well, maybe we feel so strongly about a few things that we need to tweak it a little bit this way because you want to go a little bit more that way. That's where you collaborate.
Mm-hmm.
You find a happy median. But yes, Bruins, that the baseline and managing that is so critical. And that's where the organization, to your point, has to go out of their way to make the athlete feel comfortable enough to share everything. The best organizations that I know, or the best coaches I've ever met, they're always seem to be the ones that are so interested in you and so curious to be what's called an active listener, to literally just want to know all about you, observe, listen, things you just commented on. Let's just get that done first, like 110 out of 100. Let's get that done first, and then we can move forward. And so, yes, baseline.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so let's fast forward to, and I think this is where I think the final part of this conversation is our advice and encouragement for the families, for the player, for the, and the player could be an 18-year-old getting ready to go into pro ball, could be a 23-year-old, could be anywhere in between. This is attention, like I said earlier, this is attention that is not acute to baseball, right? Like this is in all walks of life. I have a day job, part of a sales team, and every salesperson is wired individually, and we want to give them room for their individual talents to come out and shine. But we also have to have them act as a ambassador for our organization, and they have to represent our values and cultures and the things that are important to us. So that there's a tension there, right? Like be yourself, but do it within the confines of what's important to the group. And so I think all parties have an onus there, right? Like all parties have a responsibility. So when I think about the family, and I'm going to really focus on the player, because we are getting to a point in the game, we're getting like the kids 18 to 23, you're at a point in life where you as the player now need to be your own spokesperson. Like it's no longer your parents' job to speak on your behalf or your agent, etc. Those things can still happen. But, I think two words that come to mind for me, Alan, are courage and then ownership. And courage, because it's just going to be intimidating, right? Like these are people that are in professional baseball and they are experts in their field and they're very passionate. Those are all positive qualities that can also be a little intimidating. And so you're going to have the courage to speak up. And, like I'll use a non-baseball personal example. My wife, of 20 plus years has MS. And so that means that we go see a neurologist. And there's no cure for MS. So we have to have the courage when we meet with our neurologist, and it's intimidating, right? Like this person is super smart, knows way more about medicine and science than we do, but it's also our life. And so we have to have the courage to disagree with our neurologist when she may have a suggestion that we don't agree with. Like it's a have to have. Now, it doesn't mean that we're going to be disagreeable or disrespectful or all those types of things, but the courage part is a non-negotiable for me because it is your arm. It is your career. Just like for Jenny and I, it's our life. It's her body. And that's what the doctor should want. If you've got the right person, that's what they should want, is for you to speak up for yourself. So I think part one is the courage. And then part two is the ownership. And I wrote down this expression while we were talking, Alan, was role play. Like I think every young pitcher, as they're entering pro ball, should find a partner and say, okay, like let's say I was your role play partner, Alan, and I would say, okay, Alan, what is your pitching routine? And tell me why you do each of those things. And like, you don't have to wait till get into pro ball when you have, with a pitching coordinator who is, may be very intimidating, not like in a negative way, but like they're so talented that they're intimidating. Why would you wait until then to have that conversation? Like, I don't know, maybe I'm being a little corny there, but just like talking that out ahead of time. What is your routine? And why is that your routine? Because here's the truth. If you can't verbalize that, they're going to give you a routine, because they should, because you've expressed to them that you have no idea what you're doing. You're just kind of you're just showing and going. So I gave you a lot to chew on there, but again, like courage and ownership are two words that really jump out to me as far as like advice I would give to a pitcher entering a new phase of their baseball career.
Yeah, well, number one, I didn't know that about your wife, Jenny, so that hit me. So I'm sorry to hear that, brother.
No worries. Yeah.
But I know people think about this as just baseball, because you're dealing with life, and so I try to keep it in that context. But I actually, Runes, use your exact line, and I've used this line a million times, which is your arm is attached to your shoulder, not anybody else,
Right.
forever. So wherever you go with your arm, that's your career. And I have all the respect in the world. We both have lots of friends in professional baseball. I have all the respect for them. I know they're out for the player's best well-being. But like you and Jenny going to the neurologist, if you go in to meet with your pitching coordinator or your pitching coach or whoever it is, and you need to be ready to advocate for your arm and say, okay, I'll be a good person. I'll listen well, I'll do all the right things. But I don't mean to sound so hardline, but I've had pitchers have their program taken away, and I've had pitchers taken third and fifth overall in the first round. Both have two shoulder surgeries because they had their program taken away. And so I don't mince words anymore with players, and I'm very clear about this. And I basically am going to again steal your thunder, which is when you go into talk to whoever it is, and I love your idea of role playing first because I think it would desensitize the situation extremely well. Again, I'm going to drop a mental game or mental approach line, which is mental rehearsal, right? Very
Yeah.
powerful. But Runes, it's as simple as this. I believe in collaboration. I believe in communication to the hilt. But there comes a point where if you are sacrificing your intuition, your instincts of what your arm and body need, period, no matter what anybody else's program says, no disrespect to them, but you just know your body and arm and mind and instincts better than anybody, and you're being put in harm's way, there comes a point where you have to stand your ground. You might ruffle feathers, as you said, but you have to look. There's no other way of saying this. You have to advocate for your arm, because one of my favorite lines to a player is like, I'm going to give you two choices. Talk about role playing. I'll do it with you right now. Here's your two choices, right? Whether you're a first round pick or an eighth round pick, or whatever it is, doesn't matter. You have two choices. One is you show up to spring training or wherever, the complex, and they tell you what to do, which is diabolical too heavy a word, which is strongly against what you know is best for your arm. And in your gut, it's going to put you in harm's way, what they're having you do. Your arm actually, after the first day of throwing their way, was not happy. And this is not going to have a good ending. So you have two choices. One is you don't ruffle feathers and you be a good student. You don't say anything and hope to just, get through it. Or two, and maybe not get out of rookie ball or maybe break down. Or two is you ruffle some feathers, maybe a lot of feathers, but you have a 15 to 20 year career in the big leagues. Okay, now I want you to pretend like you're 45 years old looking back on your life. You had two choices in the moment of truth on July 27th when you showed up the first day to Peoria. I'm just making it up, nothing against the Padres or the Mariners, but I'm just first thing that came to my mind. And by the way, both those organizations, I love what they're doing. So you show up to Peoria, and there's the moment of truth. To your point,
yep.
Are you going to? And I just have to say this. I know I've said it probably 3 times. I am such a proponent of collaboration and communication, and even if you have to barter a little bit, I get it, right? They're just as aligned. This is, I guess, the last thing I'll say about it. There is a line, in my opinion and from my experience, because I've seen the sadness and the visceral effect on people losing their career. It's not pretty. We've all seen it. And then when I explain to them what happened and why, it's even less pretty. They need to know that if push comes to shove, that they have to advocate for what they know is best to keep them healthy, strong, durable, and position them to have the most optimal career possible. That's the end game. And you just can't, so that you can't, there are some things you can't negotiate, unfortunately. And so that was hopefully in response to your
Yeah. Yeah, I think, and this part is it's for the families, because if you're the family, you are around the player, you are an influence over the player, and I do worry, like your analogy there resonates with me. Like, of course, if you tell me that the key to being a 15-year big leaguer is to embrace confrontation, even though I'm not confrontational, then you've just told me, like, hey, here's a price that you have to pay if you want to get to your goal. But I think I worry sometimes when we say these things that people say, well, that won't happen to me. And, like there's almost a naivete there that is very dangerous. But I think the part of the realization is when you go into professional baseball, you're coming from an environment where you might have had one or two or three coaches. Like you might have had your college pitching coach and maybe someone you work with in the off season. Maybe you're a high school pitcher that has your high school pitching coach or your travel coach. And now you're going in an organization where, and this is not a condemnation of professional baseball. Like, to me, because I'm a college guy, like I think the perfect blend of a long big league career, the perfect preparation is college baseball into minor league baseball into a good player dev system, and then you're off to your big league career. And but in the big league, like in professional baseball, you are now part of 5 teams. You're part of the complex team and the A ball and the double A and the triple A and the big league, like, and every organization spends countless time, hours trying to make sure they're all speaking the same language, but it's impossible because all of those coaches are individuals with their own ways of expressing things. And, even if you can nail the language, it's still just there's gonna be different tones, and, they're not robots coaching you. So the one common thread there is you. Like, you're the one commonality there. So that's why, to use your phrase, like, you've got to be your own advocate. And I think, the way I keep going back to Jenny and I, the way we present ourselves to a neurologist is we say, look, we are open to all of the information. We haven't already decided. We want to hear everything. We want to study it. We want to know why you believe what you believe. But we also want you to know that we've also spent countless hours trying to understand why we have the routine that we have. And we have very strong convictions on how we have shown up to you today. And so the key is, how do we blend those things together? So I do think being proactive with those conversations, while very, very scary, I think it can go, it can go a long way where, like, it's funny, Jenny and I have a new appointment next week, and I've already rehearsed in my mind saying that to that doctor that, hey, we want to hear everything that you believe about this disease, but we will not be pressured into, into things that we don't believe in, because we've spent too much time and energy educating ourselves on what's important to us. I hope that doesn't come off as disrespectful or confrontational, but that's what we believe. So again, I think my biggest encouragement to the players and the families are that these conversations are inevitable. To think that you're going to spend 15 years in professional baseball and never get sideways with a coach, that is not possible. And so being ready to have those difficult conversations, I think if you're leaving that to chance, you're making a huge mistake and you're putting yourself in peril, honestly.
Well, I've seen it. I've seen it with players that I've even, I think, advised very well on, and who completely agree, understand, and want to do it. And to your point, you get there and you're overwhelmed by a lot of authority figures. And it's not the authority figures are trying to overwhelm you. It's just the nature of the beast, as we all know, especially to an 18-year-old, but really any age. And yeah, if I think, Runes, this just comes back to, and look, I'm with you. I'm very open-minded. I actually am curious what other people are thinking. I'm good that way. So I want to make sure anybody listening to this podcast knows that this is not about, one way or the highway. This is definitely about collaboration and hearing the other person's input. The thing that you and I are both saying is that if you have a strong conviction and you know in your bones, you know in your soul what makes you work, what keeps you healthy, what optimizes your arm and ability. You just have to realize that you have to trust that. And I use the word truth a lot. Something you said earlier reminded me of it. You didn't quite use the word truth, but it's what you were saying, which is I have a line which is the truth always wins. And what that means is that when you know in your truth, like in your gut, in your heart, what is right, independent of what anybody else may think, your truth is relying on you, like to support it. And so, yes, it may be a tough conversation. You may not be so kind of confrontational, but your truth is speaking volumes to you, saying, "Look, you have to look out for me. Look, you know better. You know what's the truth here in the situation, whether it ruffles feathers or not. You have to trust me." And for those that, like you said, either roll the dice or just hope it goes away, we both have seen those scenarios, and it's quite sad because maybe one uncomfortable conversation sets you up to have a very, very long career. Um, and at the end of the day, too, to the credit of the professional organizations, they've evolved a lot in areas of like communication, of listening. I hear the word a lot more now with individuality. I think they're actually excited and interested, especially if you have something to say. Like they're
Yeah.
curious. They do want to learn about you and listen to you, and maybe you'll teach them. These kids, some of these kids now, a lot of them, most of them, they do so much homework and so much research that I can get on the phone with a kid in college right now, or even high school, and they'll blow me away with like how advanced they are. Like their acumen is off the charts. So I do think professional people obviously are seeing that year after year now across the board. And so I think to the players and the families that are listening to this, or the agents, is that this is actually, I think, a warmer conversation waiting to happen than it might seem, at first. And I think that's maybe a good way for people to. And I want to reinforce what you said about role playing. I think it's you desensitize yourself, and you realize after you do it with your parent or your agent, and you realize, wow, that was just a normal, healthy, and it actually felt good because I heard myself talking about how many things I know and how well I know my own program, my own arm. It was like, it was fast. It was a great learning experience for me to go through that. I just told a player the other day who was, I was working with him on some mental stuff. And I said, I want you to get off the phone right now and call your mom or call your friend that also knows this mental game stuff. And I want you to tell them exactly what we just talked about. Like a teacher, like I want you to teach
Yeah.
them, because we all know how powerful that is. So I want to give you props again on the role playing is a brilliant idea.
Yeah, because I think it's like I will wrap it with this. Like it's really the mistake we make in human interaction is we make it personal, and it's really not personal. Just human communication is very complicated. Leadership is very complicated, and I agree with what you said. Like the professional baseball's never been in a better spot from a player dev standpoint. They've man they do such a wonderful job, but it's still two humans trying to interact, right? It's still and I'll tell you, the temptation is going to be there. It's going to feel personal when you have that coach that you don't vibe with. It's the same for coaches. When you have that player that feels obstinate and uncoachable, it's so easy to go down it's personal road, and it's just not. It's just not everyone is perfectly aligned, and our job is to do the best we can to find alignment there. And I think it's such an important part of this whole thing. And it's funny, like as the draft comes up, the draft is it's almost like signing day for the college guys. It's the same. The advantage college baseball has is, in theory, you could have the same coach for 3 years and you got to self-select that coach. Whereas in professional baseball, the truth is the player dev guys don't get to choose you and you don't get to choose them. It's an arranged marriage. But this encouragement I want to give to families as we wrap is the draft day it's a wedding day, and you should celebrate it to the hilt. You should enjoy every ounce of it, but the wedding day does not make a marriage. Draft day does not make a big leaguer. It's just a one-day celebration of where you are in the race. And when the celebration ends, the race starts again. And all these little things, that we know many of them are coming, so it's important that we don't pretend they're not coming. That we don't. If a million people have told us that marriage is hard, Jenny and I should not pretend that our marriage won't be hard, right? If a million people are telling us that being a pitcher in professional baseball has some high highs and some low lows and some pitfalls along the way, I should be smart about that. I should be smart in how I prepare for those things. So again, I want to, if you're a pitcher and a family of a pitcher in our game at the amateur level, at the professional level, if you're not tuned into Alan's stuff, jaegersports.com, it's an amazing resource. Again, this is the genesis of J bands. You probably maybe you didn't even put two and two together. Just J bands are part of it. It's like having a toothbrush for a pitcher these days. But this is the man that's behind the science. So I appreciate you, Alan. I always love our conversations. I always learn a ton and enjoy it. And thank you for this. Really appreciate it.
Runes, look, man, I told you this. You're probably tired of me saying this, but I appreciate everything you do for the game. I appreciate your passion and your wisdom, actually, because whenever we talk, I just love I've taken so many mental notes from things you said today. So, and thank you for caring, because really at the end of the day, you doing this to help, educate the community and bring awareness to the community, ultimately to try to save arms and B, position players to optimize their career. I love the wedding day analogy too. Just thank you for having me on and doing this. I really appreciate it.
You got it. Hey, to the listeners, this again is a great way to kick off our draft coverage. And next week we will be posting a podcast. David Seifert and Chris Burke are going to join me, and we're going to do kind of our own version of a mock draft. We're going to take the consensus mock drafts that are out there, and we're just going to kind of play around with it and see which consensus picks we like, and we'll describe the players to you. We'll really take it from a college baseball standpoint, but any of the premier high school guys that are projected first rounders, and that's what we're going to focus on, the first round. We'll let you know who those kids are, where they're committed, etc. So stay tuned for that. That's it. We are let's say congratulations to LSU on their 8th national title as we transition into summer coverage and the off season. And that's it. Everybody have a great summer, and we will catch you next